Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry everybody. Just give me a second here. I gotta finish combing my hair because, you know I'm all about style when I do these videos. Absolutely. Okay, so, yeah, that looks good. That looks, 100% exactly like it looked before I started this video. I'm glad I took the extra time to comb my hair. Actually, that was bad luck. I shouldn't have put that there. My grandmother was very superstitious growing up, and she was from the Ukraine. I don't know if these are actual Ukrainian superstitions, but she always told us, never put a comb on a table or a desk. That's bad luck right there. If you drop a fork in the kitchen, that means you're going to get company. And if the back of your hand is itchy, that means that meant something. Oh, somebody's talking about you. If the back of your hand is itchy, so yeah, that was the first time in my life I've ever personally put a comb on a table or a desk. So I guess we'll see where this goes. So hey everybody, how you doing? Tekking and Barry here, back again. And today we're gonna be talking about something, a little bit of something that happens at the end of chapter 1007. A character appears, or rather reappears, I guess I should say. This was the thing that everybody was just, like, you know, messaging me over this entire week. As soon as the spoilers came out, everybody was just like, you know, Tekking, did you read the spoilers? Do you know what happens? Do you know who what appears at the end of the blah, 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 blah? I'm gonna keep that take because that's pretty much how it all was. You know, everyone was like freaking out over this. And I freaked out too, of course, when I first actually read the spoilers. The first batch of spoilers that came out actually did not include the end. And so it was like a mystery. And then like the next day it was added and it was like the person is Oden. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, we'll see where this goes. And then I read the chapter itself, and, you know, I talked about it in the review. I mentioned how there was, like, slight discrepancies between the Oden that we see at the end of chapter 1007 and the Oden that we've seen in the flashback. A couple of notes on that I will bring up. So, the biggest discrepancy is still the swords. Obviously, this Oden does not wield Enma and Ame no Habekiri, because obviously Enma is being wielded by Zoro. Ame no Habekiri is still on the mainland of Wano, in the possession of Tenguyama Hitetsu. Okay, so that would make sense. Like, even if this, let's say just, okay, this is the actual Oden through time travel shenanigans, or he just survived a bullet to the head and he just managed to escape somehow when no one was paying attention, and he just, like, hid out in the woods of Wano for 20-something years, literally doing nothing and nobody noticing him. Let's just assume this was the actual Oden, and he didn't age a day. Even if it was, he still would not have Enma and Ame no Habakiri because, you know, they're in different locations. So that makes sense. I did say in the video that, you know, his robe, his gi, is a little bit longer than the way that he wore it back in the flashback. Because when he first appears, when he's walking through the streets of Wano at the beginning of the flashback, right around the Mountain God incident when he was 18 years old, he had it, like, really short. So you could kind of see, like, his fundoshi, like his underwear underneath it, right? Somebody actually went ahead and actually posted me images, like, throughout that flashback. Yeah, Oden did wear his robe very short back at the beginning of it, but throughout the flashback, as time progresses, because remember, that flashback takes over a period of like 20 years, from 41 years ago to 20 years ago, okay? So a lot of stuff happens, and a lot of the characters, you know, like Kinemon changes his hairstyle, or rather, I think he bleached his hairstyle back when he was a teenager, like a rebel. He had blonde hair, and then he returned to his regular hair color when he got older, when he became a vassal of Oden for, you know, the Curry region, okay? He went back to his black hair, right? So, you know, characters change quite a bit throughout this flashback, and we actually do get to see Oden wearing his, like, gi with a longer robe throughout the, you know, course of that flashback. Like, during the moment where they conquer Curry, and, you know, he's made the daimyo of Curry, and they have that big, you know, the picture taken with all the different scabbards there and everything for the paper. I think he has a longer robe there, and there's a few other moments, like when he's older and he's married Toki, and he has a Hiyori and Momo, and he's a dad. He also wears it, like, a little longer there. So, that's not as much of a discrepancy as I originally assumed. Beyond that, the actual appearance of Oden looks exactly like it did during the flashback, other than the swords, and I guess the robe isn't that big of a deal. However, that in of itself kind of gives us some information to speak of, like the fact that he looks exactly like he did 20-something years ago, okay? So this is probably not like Oden somehow managed to survive and just live through 20 years, because even the biggest badasses in One Piece, like Garp and Whitebeard, you know, they're incredibly strong, they have powerful haki, and like Rayleigh, for instance, but they still age, you know, they still get, you know, gray hair, or they lose their hair, they still get wrinkles, you know, Rayleigh could, like, you know, go toe-to-toe with an admiral, possibly even more than one admiral. He's Dark King Rayleigh, for God's sake. But he still has the gray hair, and he's still got, you know, the wrinkles on his face and everything like that. So Oden, when the flashback started, he was 18 years old, and then it's 21 years later, so 20 years ago when he died, and so that means he would have been, like, you know, 39 years old. He'd be pushing 40, and so another 20 years, he'd be, like, 60 years old, so I would imagine he would age a little bit if that was what happened, okay? So let's just take that right off the table right away, okay? Something I noticed, and I mean, I brought it up in the video a little bit. I mentioned the Koma Gitsune, Onimaru, his transformation abilities. I mentioned the Mane Mane no Mi a little bit just because I made that video last week, which the reason I made that video, by the way, that idea came about like with the last episode of the anime. That was well before the spoilers came out. It's just weird how that episode involving Higurashi that had the Mane Mane no Mi with Orochi and everything, that episode came out right before this happened. I'm wondering if Oda even planned that or something. I mean, there's no way he really could have, I guess, but he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna wait for that episode of the anime to come out with the clone fruit, and then I'm going to have an episode or a chapter of the manga where Oden shows back up. And that'll at least make people think, like, maybe it is. It's clearly not, because, you know, obviously Higurashi died, and then, you know, later on the fruit is reincarnated and Mr. 2 Bon Clay gets it. Although, as a side note with that, I just want to throw up there, in that Mane Mane no Mi video with Higurashi, I mentioned that this character that she transforms into, the girl, the blonde girl with the lipstick, you know, that girl is going to be extremely relevant at some point in the story, and a lot of people were saying that she might have very well have been Miss Bakin back when she was younger and she was on Rox's crew, because we knew Whitebeard and Miss Bakin were on the same crew, and, you know, I think it was also stated that back in her younger years, Miss Bakin was, you know, very beautiful, and so, you know, Higurashi also turned into Shiki, who was also a member of Rox's crew, so I'm locking in that this is Miss Bakin at age, like, you know, like 25 or whatever. Let's just lock in with that. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. Okay, so it's not the Mane Mane no Mi. Mr. 2 has that. He's in level 5.5 Impel down. He's still alive, so that's a good thing. Now, that doesn't exactly rule out the idea that there could be other devil fruits that allow you to transform into things, because Mr. 2's devil fruit allowed him, very specifically, he can only transform into, well, not even really necessarily other human beings, because he did copy Chopper, although Chopper does have the Hito Hito no Mi, which allows him to become a human. So I don't really know if Mr. 2 could, like, you know, go up to a horse or something and copy the body of a horse. I don't know, could he do that? I'm not really sure. But my point is, there might be another devil fruit out there somewhere where it has a much more broad transformation ability, where you could just maybe transform into anything that you think of, even if it's something that doesn't, like, really exist, you know, or something, maybe. I don't know. But Mr. 2's Mane Mane no Mi, that's definitely off the table, right? In the video, I threw out the idea of the, Onimaru being the one, and I think that makes a lot of sense given the fact that Onimaru, you know, lived with Ushimaru in the Ringo region. Ushimaru was the daimyo of that region. He was a Shimosuke. They definitely would have met Oden and Toki at some point. That's also very important to mention, that the person that was healing the scabbards did not look like Oden in the silhouette. So I think we're definitely dealing with some sort of transformation shenanigans right here, but that doesn't really narrow it down very much, because Oda did a splendid job of introducing a bunch of transformation abilities during this arc, or maybe not all in this arc, but a lot of people that have transformation abilities appear during this arc, okay? So yes, we had Higurashi with the Mane Mane no Mi, and we had Onimaru with the Kitsune transformation ability, because Kitsune are yokai that are like trickster fox demons that have the ability to transform into things, right? But beyond that, Katarina Devon was shown in between Act 1 and 2 of Wano when we cut over to the Hachinosu, and she also has the ability of the Nine-Tailed Fox mythical zone, and we do not know the full capabilities of that. Artor, you know, he did his chapter breakdown, and I would say to everybody go and read that. I'll leave a link to the Library of Ohara below. You know, he left a really long, you know, essay on all the different possibilities of this. I believe that he stated, like, Katarina Devon, well, you know, that she didn't really know Oden all that well, so that makes sense that, you know, it wouldn't be her, because, you know, in order to transform into somebody, that's one thing, but in able to, like, you know, copy their mannerisms and their memories and everything like that, you know, that would be a little bit more difficult. But then I would say to that, we do not know how that mythical zone operates to its fullest extent, right? We only saw her transform into Absalom, not even transform into Absalom. We only saw her transform from Absalom back into herself. And so she was like as Absalom, and then she jumped off the roof and then flipped and then turned back into herself, and that was it. We don't know the extent of that fruit. That fruit, the mythical nine-tailed fox zone, that might be able to copy somebody's memories or body mannerisms or something. It might be a higher level of transformation because it is a mythical zone. You know, it's not, you know, proven or anything like that, but it's just like, okay, it might have something else beyond that. It might even be a stronger transformation fruit than the Mane Mane no Mi. Who knows? Let's see. We also have, this is something I did not mention in the video, Conjuro's Devil Fruit. This would be a great way to reintroduce Conjuro back into the story. Last time we saw him, he was just kind of bleeding out in the snow, and then that was a really emotional scene there, because after he betrayed the Scabbards, and then eventually he gets defeated by them, and then Kinemon and Denjiro arrive with their respective armies about to go into the back entrance of Onigashima and attack Kaido. They don't even say anything to Conjuro. They don't stop and say, like, well, here you lie as a traitor. You know, we're very disappointed in you, Conjuro. They don't say anything. They just walk by his body. Kinemon takes off his Casa hat. He just kind of reminisces, kind of remembers back when they were all a family living together in Curry, in the castle with Oden. And then he just takes off his hat, and he lays it on top of Conjuro, and he just continues on. They don't even say a word to him, okay? And then Izo was there, and so Kinemon's like, hey, Izo, it's been a while. It's like, yeah, let's go do this. Let's go bring him down, right? And so, I mean, the big question is Conjuro really dead? I didn't really get the implication that he was. I mean, this is One Piece after all. This is a series where even when you have Orochi that was decapitated by Kaido, and we see every moment of that, we see Kaido just straight up decapitate Orochi right there in the panel, and his head just hit the ground. Even in that situation, this is One Piece. I'm still sitting here like, well, we don't know for sure yet, you know? And we just saw his head a couple chapters ago, so I'm like, I guess he's dead, but even now, I'm more confident that Orochi's dead now than when it actually happened, but I'm still not 100%, you know what I mean, right? Okay, so Conjuro just laying in some, you know, bloody snow and not moving. Hell, man, I mean, that doesn't mean anything. He could just, like, get you knocked unconscious, gets back up, and just, like, okay. So, the biggest question, though, is, of course, you know, even if it was Conjuro that made, you know, the ink clones, because we know Conjuro's actual drawing ability is way better than what he originally, you know, perceived it as. You know, like, he could only draw, like, really crappy, you know, like, birds or, you know, that cat or Ryunosuke, the dragon. He can actually draw very well to the point where he can even make an ink clone of himself, right? Okay, so a lot of people have said that because Orochi is now dead, because the Kurozumis are no longer in control of Wano. Let's be honest here. The Kurozumis, like, it was kind of Kaido from day one. As soon as the giant dragon god showed up, you know, Kaido was the one that ruled the country. Kaido just kind of let Orochi take care of, like, the day-to-day operations and everything. But now that Orochi's dead, and, I mean, you know, Conjuro, I think, from what we know of right now, Conjuro is the only surviving Kurozumi clan member. Because Higurashi was killed by Kaido 20 years ago. Semimaru was already pretty damn old, and we know he died because the barrier fruit got taken up by Bartolomeo. We don't know how Semimaru died, if he was killed by Kaido as well, or if he just died of old age, but he's definitely dead. And if Orochi is, you know, definitely dead right now, I don't think Orochi has any kids or anything like that, so if that's the case, then all the Kurozumis might be all but, you know, wiped out of Wano after the generations of the Wano citizens hunting them, and then with Orochi, I mean, that's pretty much over. Plus, I think Orochi even, like, he came out and said, like, I want to run this country into the ground. Like, that's the whole reason, that's the whole purpose I wanted to become Shogun, just to ruin everything. So I'll live in luxury, and then after I'm gone, I'm just gonna like, I think Orochi, before he got decapitated, his plan was to live to a ripe old age in luxury, and then right before he was about to die, or right when it was, like, about to look like he was gonna die, then he would just do something to, like, you know, destroy all the major cities in Wano or something, or just, like, cause it into ruin, right? And then he would go out, and then that would be it. So I don't don't think he had any kids or anything like that. I mean, he had plenty of opportunities. He was the shogun, but yeah. So now that Orochi's gone, though, and Conjuro's the only Kurozumi, maybe Conjuro would have had a change of heart, maybe. Conjuro would have gotten back up after that, and he would have maybe remembered, you know, it was like, oh, well, yeah, I was an actor. I was all part of this master plan from, like, day one with Orochi to seep into Oden's entourage and everything. Now, Conjuro was one of the samurai that time jumped, just like, you know, Raizo and Kinemon. So, you know, he didn't spend the last 20 years thinking of this plan, but it's still been over a decade. When, you know, Oden went around, well, it was a little bit over a decade. Actually, it was close to 20 years from the time that Oden was traveling all over the nation, and then they found Conjuro in the Kibi region, like, collecting the hair of corpses and, like, you know, cutting the hair off of people's heads. It's been about maybe 20 years since then, from Conjuro's point of view, his perspective, right? So, I don't know, maybe he just decided, like, okay, Orochi's dead now, and the rest of the scabbards are... You know what I mean? Like, yeah, so that's the only family I have left, and maybe he feels bad about it. There's no way he could properly, like, atone for what he's done, so that's why he drew Oden to maybe, like, okay, I'll draw a fake Oden to, like, lessen the blow a little bit, maybe. I don't know how this would go, and there's another completely opposite angle you can look at this. Instead of Conjuro changing his mind and becoming a good guy now, what if he's still just the most, like, duplicitous actor he already was? You know, what if Conjuro got back up, saw that Orochi was dead, and now he's like, okay, I'm the only Kurozumi remaining. I'm the only one that can avenge my clan. It's all on me now. Orochi's gone. I have no support from that end now. I have to be the one to do everything. Now, that would actually be very... I mean, that would be just doubling down on Conjuro being a traitor. Like, it's not going to be like a flip, you know? Like, from day one, this is who he was, and just a few fights that he had with his former friends is not going to change his mind on this, right? And I'll be honest with you, Conjuro did not really seem to be all that, like, overly conflicted. You know, after he, you know, left the Scabbards and kidnapped Momo and went back to Onigashima, he didn't really seem like, oh... I feel kind of bad for what I did. Well, no, he didn't seem conflicted at all, right? So if he gets right back up and he sees Orochi's dead, he might be like, okay, I gotta do this now. What's the best way for me to take out the Scabbards? Well, I guess the best way for that would have been to do it when they were already wounded, so why did he heal them? That's the big question. If this was Conjuro, and he did create, like, a clone of Toki or a clone of Oden, you know, why not just kill them when they were already unconscious? Well... Conjuro is not the most, like, you know, there was that moment when he was in, like, the tunnel with Momo, and Momo tried to escape, and he lost his temper, and he beat the ever-loving crap out of Momo. So, he might be somewhat unhinged, maybe even a lot unhinged, right? You know, and so it might be a situation where he's just like, oh, well, yeah, I could have eliminated all of you when you were already on the brink of death and unconscious after your fight with Kaido, but where's the joy in that? I'm an actor! I am all about the style, you know what I mean? So he's like, I'll heal you first, and then I'll bring Oden in, your former master, your former daimyo, your lord, and then you'll all be like, Oden, my god, you're back! And then that's when I take out the sword, and then, yeah, I mean, that would be really jacked up, but... I mean, like, if we're going along with the logic that Conjuro, you know, always, you know, went with the will of the Kurozumi and Orochi, and he was like that from day one, and it was all just a massive act, that does sound like something that Conjuro would do. So, either Conjuro, he's still alive, and he decided to be, you know, an ally, and that's why he went to go heal them. Although, one other thing that does sort of bug me about this, and there are reasons for it, but it did bug me. If Conjuro was just creating a Kozuki Oden just with his drawing abilities, he could draw Oden however he wanted, right? You know, because that's the power of his fruit. So why did he draw Oden with swords that were not Enma and Ame no Habakiri? You know, if it is a clone, he's like getting an ink clone, why couldn't he just draw him with Enma and Ame no Habakiri, like the way he remembered? The reason for that is maybe if he did that, maybe it would have been too obvious to the Scabbards, like the Scabbards would have noticed. Like, oh, you're Oden! Hey, where'd you get Enma and Ame no Habakiri? Isn't that with Zoro? And You're not the real Oden! Even though we should have already known that. He died like 20 years ago. But once again, One Piece. I will say this, though. This is one of the few instances where Oda has actually pulled this crap, right? Where in every flashback, in every arc of One Piece, maybe not every arc of One Piece, but whenever we get that really sad flashback, there's always somebody that dies, right? There's always a character that Oda introduces that makes us fall in love with them and feel really bad for their plight, and then they die in a horrible way, right? Like Corazon back in, Law's flashback at Dressrosa, or Bellamere in Nami's flashback, or Tom in Frankie's backstory, or the whole Rumbar crew in Brooke's backstory, right? I'll tell you what, though, Oda does not usually pull this crap where it's like, here's somebody that straight up died in a flashback that made us all care about him, and then that person shows up in the present storyline in the same arc. This would be like, at the end of Arlong Park, freaking Bellamere walks through Arlong Park, and Nami's like, what? Like that, it would be like that level of shock, or like, after the flashback at Dressrosa when Law is fighting against Doflamingo, freaking Roshinade shows up at the last minute, like, wait, what? That's some pretty powerful stuff that Oda might have been waiting for this moment, right? Okay. But, yeah. Conjuro, I think, makes a lot of sense, but it's like which direction you can take it. Either way, I think would you have some credentials there. Let's see. Now, let's say it wasn't Oden that, like, survived and lived 20 years, but let's say you get Toki's power involved, because that's something else that got introduced during this arc. Time travel. If One Piece wasn't already confusing enough, now Oda drops the time travel bomb. Okay, alright, well, alright, there is so much stuff here that's, like, ambiguous, like, the way that Toki died was ambiguous. I would not say the way that Oden died was ambiguous. I mean, it did look like he got shot in the head. I mean, he had, like, the silhouette, got shot by Kaido, same way that Arlong shot Bellamere, right? Goes into silhouette, boom, you see the splurt of blood, he fell into the freaking pot of oil, and you just see his smile fade in. And, his body was right there, in the pot of oil, so if Oden somehow survived and got out, wouldn't people have noticed that, That does bring up a question, like, what did happen to Oden's body? Did it just disappear? Because if that happened, I could kind of understand Orochi's kind of fear. Like, oh no, we executed Oden this afternoon, but then his body wasn't in the vat! What happened to it? Oh no! I could see that! That would be weird. I mean, they could have just buried it up in that grave, because that mass grave up at where Oden Castle was, yeah, a lot of the graves were just, like empty graves, like Kinemon's grave and Momo's grave. They were obviously not in there, but that makes me think, like, if they dug up Oden's grave, would Oden have been under there? Given how paranoid Orochi was, if they did find his body, they would have probably have taken, like, his, like make sure everything was gone and just eliminated, like thrown the bones in a furnace or whatever. Or maybe you could have a moment kind of like Canute in Vinland Saga, where, like, Orochi is just talking to the severed head or the skull of Oden every night, and just be like, Oden, you're not going to get the best of me! And Oden's skull is just in the corner, and it's just like, no, yes, of course, you're the greatest leader ever. You're gonna lead this country into a new freaking age of wonder and merriment. Yes, you bet so, Oden! How dare you? So, my point is, if Oden somehow managed to escape the vats without anybody seeing him, and then if Toki did not die after giving her prophecy in Curry, somehow they meet each other, and then they time jump into the future together, and Toki is the one that healed the scabbards, and then Oden also made the time jump. That's the reason he did not age. Maybe. I would say it's a little weird, because you still think he would have some sort of scar on his forehead from being shot point blank by Kaido. It's Oden we're talking about here. I'm not completely against the idea that Oden could have survived that, but to survive that with no scar or anything on his forehead, that's a little weird. So I don't like the time travel idea. I really don't like the idea of this being the real Oden, period. I think that kind of undermines the whole story of Wano and the plot, for Oda to go about it the way he did and have him just come right back. Now during the flashback, there were a lot of moments where during the flashback, I was like, I really hope Oden gets out of this, even though we kind of know that he doesn't. And maybe that might be what Oda's trying to go for, is like he's setting up the arc all predicated on the fact that Oden is already dead. The reason a lot of this stuff is currently happening, the reason that Kaido is in power, the reason Orochi is the Shogun, the reason the Scabbards had to time jump, was because Oden died. That was the impetus that kind of kicked off a lot of this, right? And so, because it's so relevant, and because Oda set this up arcs in advance that Kozuki Oden is long dead, that would be the twist in the final hour of the arc, or maybe the final hour of Act 3, because we're still on Act 3. Like, actually, no, the whole basis for this entire arc, Oden being dead, is actually not true. He's still alive and well. Be like, that would be very hard to, I think, write in a way to make it make sense, and to make it, what's the best way for me to describe this? Not infuriating. You know, if it's just like, hey guys, hey scabbards, how you doing? Oden-sama, you're alive? Yeah, I'm alive. But how? Muffin button? No, okay. Alright, so here's what happened, guys. Yeah, so it was crazy, right? Kaido shot me, and I went under the oil, and then, you know, I dug a hole under the vat, and then escaped the flower capital, and then I ran back to Curry, and then the same time, Toki ran back from Curry, and we ran into each other, and we're like, Toki, you're alive! It's like, Oden, you're alive! It's like, yeah, I know, and there's still blood coming down my head from where I got shot. It's like, ah, 'tis but a flesh wound, I'll be fine. It's like, okay, where are the scabbards at? It's like, well, I sent them into the future. Why did you do that? Well, you know, I thought you were dead. Okay, makes sense. Hey, how about we go into the future? Oh, that's lovely. I love you, dear. Love you too. And they pop into the future. Like, that would be rather... like, alright, okay, so the whole basis for this happening was just missed timing, I guess? You know, I just don't like the idea of this being the real Oden. You know, if Oda writes it a good way, if he can figure out some way to, like, don't worry, guys, don't worry. It'll all make sense, and it'll all follow the theme of the arc. It'll be perfectly fine. I'm like, okay, Oda, but that's a pretty tall order to fill, right? It's kind of like if you did that with any other character that apparently died. Like, okay, here's a good example. So we never actually saw Tom die in Frankie's backstory, right? He just got carried away on the sea train, and we just never saw him again. We assumed he was executed. He wasn't an impel down or anything, so we assumed he was executed, right? You know, if you were going to bring Tom back into the story... you can't just do it with just like, hey guys, how you doing? I'm Tom. I survived with a dawn. How? Oh, I jumped off the sea train. I'm a fishman. So, and I don't have a devil fruit, so I just jumped off the sea train, went into the water, and I hid under the water for like 20-something years. Oh. Alright, well, that makes sense. Yeah, it does. You know, like... honestly speaking, that does make a lot of sense. Now, actually, why couldn't he? He is a fishman. Just jump off the... But let's say if he did do that, we'd be sitting there like, what the hell? Like, there has to be more to it than that, right, Oda? So maybe he could do something? I don't know. But yeah, right at this moment, I'm still going along with the Kitsune, and I didn't reference it this much now because that's the thing I kind of went into a lot of detail in the video. But if, you know, Onimaru was a legitimate Kitsune from, like, Japanese lore, like, he's a yokai, he could really transform into anybody, even though we've only seen him transform into Gyukimaru. Artor actually said in his description that he thinks that, Onimaru is not like a full-fledged Kitsune, like a yokai that can transform into anything. He thinks that he might have just eaten like a human-human fruit variant, like the human-human fruit model Dharma, because the form of Gyukimaru kind of looks like a Dharma. It's possible. It is conceivable. Just considering the fact that we have like yokai-like creatures in Wano, I think it fits. And considering it would have been an ally with Kawamatsu and Oden back in the day, I think it works. And, you know, the Kitsune obviously hasn't seen the scabbards in a while, except for Kawamatsu, so it'd be like, oh, you guys have grown old, and I think that makes sense. Yeah. Now, one more thing I wanted to say, one more thing before I leave, that I have not seen anybody talk about, really. I don't know what the feasibility of this is, but transformation jutsu. Now, you might be thinking, like, Tekking, this is not Naruto. There is no transformation jutsu. Can you be sure of that, alright? Because ninjutsu for Wano has kind of been established as, like, its own little power system. Like, we could have just assumed, like, yeah, okay, like, you know, Raizo's little things that he was doing at Zou, like, he did the shadow clones or whatever like that was just him moving really fast or something. No, it really does seem like, from what we've seen with the Oni Wabanshu, this is like an actual thing that ninjas can do. Like, they can do the substitution technique, they can do the shadow shuriken, they can kind of do all that stuff, right? you know, some... Now, there were some cases like Raizo has the scroll devil fruit. That's obviously a fruit power, right? But I will say that there is a ninja that works for the Oni Wabanshu called Sarutobi, right? Sarutobi Sensei. And Sarutobi's specialty, as explained by Oda, when Oda explained all of the Oni Wabanshu's special, like, ninjutsu abilities, was illusion jutsu, alright? So, look, I'm not saying as, like, very feasible. I'm not even 100% on this myself, but I just haven't really seen anybody talking about the ninja angle, and there are ninjas in Wano. It doesn't have to be a member of the Oniwaban. It could be, or Shinobu. It could be another ninja. Oda might just introduce a new character, or maybe a member of the Oniwabanshu, because Sarutobi did wear a mask. Maybe Sarutobi takes off the mask, and he was somebody that we knew from, like, 20 years ago, or was an ally of the Kozukis this whole time, and just stayed deep cover or something. Shinobu used to be a member of the Oniwabanshu back in the day, so the idea that, you know, Shinobu came from that group and was an ally of Oden, you know, maybe there was another ally of Oden there too, and they just, you know, laid low this entire time, and they used the transformation jutsu to turn into Toki or to turn into Oden to, like, you know, it's like, okay, don't get freaked out by, because if I turn into him, if I'm just like my regular form, you're gonna think I'm an enemy. If I just open the door and like, hi guys, I'm a member of the Oniwabanshu, you may be like, oh, it's the enemy, attack him. Like, no, I'm not an enemy. So it might be easier just to turn into Oden, right? Just wanted to throw out the ninja possibilities. All right, well, with that being said, there's a break this week coming up with One Piece, so I guess we'll have to wait 2 weeks to see if this is expanded upon, or if Oda decides just to cut away from it for another 3 chapters. That's also a possibility, too. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Remember to check out Artor and the chapter breakdowns and all that stuff. Description is where the link can be found for that. This is Tekking, this is Barry, this is Tekking's Comb, and Cloneberry signing out. Later, everybody.